The Israeli military is poised to enter Gaza soon to fight Hamas and rescue over 200 hostages. Now they'll have to engage in urban warfare. Urban warfare, or fighting in built-up areas as it's called, is among the most challenging forms of warfare. Now the siege of Stalingrad during the Second World War was the worst urban war in history. It lasted 5 months and caused the deaths of over 2 million people. Now, the 21st century has seen intense and brutal combat in cities from Fallujah and Mosul in Iraq, Marawi in the Philippines, and more recently, Bakhmut and Mariupol in Ukraine. Fighting in cities is complex, it's slow, it's destructive, and horribly costly in human life, especially civilian lives. Fighting is slow and grinding, it's house by house and street by street, and there are several reasons why this is challenging. Here are the 5 immutable rules of urban combat. Cities level the battle space between attackers and defenders. In fact, they favor defenders over the attackers because smaller groups of defenders can hold their ground against larger enemy forces. Conventional warfare involves an attacking force overwhelming its opponents using firepower and massed bodies of troops. In a city, defenders can hide in buildings, they can create networks of tunnels under the buildings that will allow them to switch positions and fire on the attacking force. In Gaza, for instance, Hamas is believed to have created a fortified network of nearly 500 kilometers of underground tunnels, unlike any seen in the world. A city attack is complicated. It's a combined arms assault against urban centers. It involves infantry, artillery, special forces, tanks, intelligence, surveillance, combat engineers, and drones. But the disadvantage is that the attackers are in the open, and hence they take fire from the enemy hidden inside the cities. Now, enemies can target the opposing forces using rocket-propelled grenades. They can fire at them using snipers and booby traps. Buildings become bunkers in urban warfare. Buildings are built of concrete and bricks. They can resist gunfire. So that's a very important plus point seen from the perspective of a defender. Every doorway and every window becomes an opening through which snipers or anti-tank crews can fire at the enemy. Now, because buildings are so useful to defenders, they will have to be destroyed. And this is usually done by aerial bombardment or firing heavy caliber weapons or planting explosives or using tanks. There are additional challenges because the rubble itself is used by both sides to hide and fire at each other. One of the principles of military offensives is the concentration of forces to overwhelm the enemy. The problem in city warfare is that the terrain is such that it forces both the attackers and the defenders to break themselves up into smaller teams and to assault buildings and streets with smaller teams led by young officers and NCOs. So warfare itself is broken down into a series of smaller actions as opposed to larger engagements that conventional wars normally see. So these are some of the rules the Israeli forces will have to keep in mind as they enter the Gaza Strip.